The idea that we've been exploring over the weekend has been to make use of Iqaluit as a one-time short-term isolation site.
Tonight, questions over quarantine in Nunavut.
So it's kind of for everyone, and it's just exciting.
And Nihiawak is nominated for the 2020 Polaris Prize. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. An online petition recently crossed the milestone, 50,000 virtual signatures. Former Ontario Regional Chief Isidore Day created the petition in the early stages of the COVID pandemic. As Todd Lamoran reports, he still believes the matter is urgent.
3 months ago, daily press briefings by Prime Minister Trudeau and public health officials like Dr. Theresa Tam brought home how serious the federal government took the pandemic. But Isidore Day worried that First Nations would slip through the cracks.
Back then, it didn't seem like we were there, and there were a number of us that were concerned about the lack of resources in our communities.
That's why he spearheaded this online petition. It now has more than 54,000 signatures and has 4 broad principles asking Ottawa to respond to COVID-19 with urgent resources. One of those principles listed is outbreak control through stocking up on things like personal protective equipment. Indigenous Services has responded. There have been no shortfalls and responds to requests for equipment within 24 to 48 hours. Day acknowledges that, but warns about a second wave.
My question is are we prepared for that? Are we prepared for something in the magnitude of a Spanish flu? I don't think we are, and which leads me to believe government still needs to work with us to make those things happen that are going to protect our communities.
Another principle on the petition is immediate recognition of UNDRIP. Day says it would help Indigenous leaders be partners in discussions about reopening the U.S.-Canada border, for example.
Potentially, we could be opening up the border to death, really, because what's happening in the United States right now, we pale in comparison to the impacts. But once that border opens up, if it opens up the flow of COVID active virus coming across the border, we run the risk of seeing what's taking place down in the States.
Again, Day says that despite circumstances changing since the petition was first put online, it is still providing advocacy for First Nations.
I think we have already been able to gain some level of traction in terms of just creating a level of awareness and second sober thought on some of the decisions that government is making.
Indigenous Services did provide a lengthy response to the petition, mainly detailing the things Mark Miller has announced over the past 3.5 months. Like $280 million for PPEs. Todd Lamoran, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Nunavut's government came out to address 2 different stories about their COVID-19 response today. One, did the Premier really get to spend his 14-day medical quarantine on the land after a trip to Winnipeg? And is a quarantine site coming to Iqaluit? Our Ken Driscoll has the answers.
Since March, when you visit a southern location, Nunavut residents have had to spend 14 days in a medical quarantine before returning. Premier Joe Savikata didn't. He took to social media on Sunday to explain he had approval to isolate at his camp from the Office of the Chief Public Health Officer after a trip to Winnipeg to retrieve his float plane. The Chief Public Health Officer confirms the Premier had approval, saying the plane made the difference.
The Premier was specifically treated as we have some other private pilots flying in their planes, trying to manage the risk in a way that works for everybody.
Those hubs are a key part of the Nunavut COVID response, and there have been no cases of COVID-19 in Nunavut communities. Now the government confirms they're considering using Iqaluit as a hub to take the pressure off their Winnipeg facility, which has a long wait before you begin quarantine. But they stressed it isn't a done deal. At least not yet.
There was a perception out in the public that it was a done deal, that there was a flight coming tomorrow from Winnipeg, bringing people into Iqaluit for medical travel in Winnipeg, and that's not the case.
The idea that we've been exploring over the weekend has been to make use of Iqaluit as a one-time short-term isolation site for a couple of weeks to get people, to get us through this period where there's excess demand for isolation in Winnipeg until we can augment capacity there.
Most Nunavut residents don't have the option the Premier had, to fly your private plane to self-isolate on the land. Most have to spend 2 weeks in medical lockdown before returning to Nunavut. Now that lockdown could be moving from the south to Iqaluit. Iqaluit residents have to wonder if it was dangerous enough that people had to stay in the south. Why is it safe enough for them to do the same in Iqaluit now? Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Over the weekend, Haida Gwaii reported their first confirmed case of COVID-19. Health officials and Haida leadership are working together to try to limit the spread on the island located off BC's north coast. A member in the community self-reported to leadership they tested positive for the virus. Health officials have been contact tracing in communities. The Council of Haida Nation cancelled public gatherings and implemented curfews in the towns of Skidegate and Masset in an attempt to limit the spread of COVID-19 on the island. Daughters of the River spokesperson Adina Young says members trust their leadership.
Now that it's here, we continue to put our trust in the leadership and our local emergency operations centers that they're doing whatever they can to isolate that case and prevent an outbreak. And as community members, we need to be responsible ourselves and make sure we're practicing, social distancing.
After an outbreak and facing COVID-related racism, the Siksika First Nation east of Calgary says there are no more active cases in the community. According to the nation's Facebook page, dozens of its members have recovered from the virus. A curfew was put in place earlier this month because there were nearly 300 investigations into potential cases. Siksika members have also dealt with discrimination when local businesses allegedly denied access to those living on reserve because of the outbreak. The nation's health services says they will continue to do testing for members with or without symptoms. Some encouraging news today in the hunt for a vaccine for COVID-19. Researchers in the United Kingdom say their experimental coronavirus vaccine has prompted an immune response to people who received the shot. Experts say so far the results are promising.
What's really promising about this vaccine is that it has maintained an immune response with a boosting dose, and we've seen the representation of what's called neutralizing antibodies. So these are the antibodies that not only recognize an infecting organism but can actually kill it effectively. A lot of the other trials that have been done thus far haven't really been able to replicate the immune response with these neutralizing antibodies.
A 100% neutralizing antibody response was found in this trial, but experts say there's still a lot more testing that needs to be done before the vaccine can get the green light. In other news, the movement to remove colonial monuments continued over the weekend in Toronto. About 100 people watched as demonstrators painted statues of Sir John A. Macdonald and King Edward VII at Queen's Park and Ryerson University. Hundreds more rallied in front of Toronto Police Services after 3 people involved in the protest were detained and charged. Sarah Saudi is an organizer with Black Lives Matter Toronto, who says the statues must come down.
I think it would mean a step towards a better world. I think it would mean a more genuine step towards reconciliation. And I want to say that the solidarity between all oppressed people everywhere is absolutely important in this movement. Because when we say Black Lives Matter, it means that we will not stop until we are all free. We are doing this for all of us.
We've got to step aside for a short break, but before we do, here's a look at a story we're working on.
I'm Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, and coming up soon on APTN National News.
We have lived without sewer for a good 3 or 4 years.
I'll be telling the stories of 2 communities in the Northwest Territories and their severe problems they have with housing.
And a person will be able to wheelchair.
but also the solutions they're hoping for.
Of course, we need to run our own program.
That's coming up soon on APTN National News.
Here's a look at Tuesday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. Halifax, 29 with showers, 16 and rain for St. John's. 22 in Nain, 27 with sunny skies in Cartwright. 27 under sunny skies for Montreal, 26 in Saguenay. 27 in Toronto and Peterborough, 26 in Ottawa. 20 in Thunder Bay with showers, rain, and 24 for Sioux Lookout. 26 with rain for Churchill, 27 in God's Lake. 23 and rain for Winnipeg, 24 for Gimli with showers. 24 in Regina with the sun out, 25 in Saskatoon. 25 in Uranium City, 23 with showers in Buffalo Narrows. Welcome back. 30 years ago, the Canadian military was brought into Kahnawake and Kanesatake in an effort to control the Mohawk resistance. All of this over plans to build a golf course on traditional land. Here's the story in the words of the people who were there. From the 1990 Mohawk uprising to the breakdown of negotiations to abuse at the hands of Quebec provincial police to the day the tanks rolled in onto Mohawk territory.
Well, we've got a lot of traffic problems this morning for people who are just waking up. The Mercier Bridge has been blocked off by the Kahnawake warriors. You cannot get anywhere near it.
I was on the bridge all summer. That's my home. That's my second home. The Mercier Bridge is a major artery to get traffic in and on the island of Montreal.
People had to go around. It took them, take 4 hours to get to Montreal.
And the whole reason we did that was to protect Kanesatake.
So everyone is angry and fed up with this bullshit that's going on.
The only thing that negotiations really focused on were the barricades at the Mercier Bridge.
We did clamp scrap metal on the side of the bridge and brought a torch up and start blowing sparks off. And all over the press, the Mohawks are cutting the bridge down. Essentially,
that was the only thing that negotiations were about. They weren't about people leaving here peacefully. They weren't about no criminal charges. It wasn't about anything. It wasn't even about land.
Today is a breakthrough. Today we've agreed on preconditions.
Originally, we had a tentative agreement with Ellen Gabriel, which would have respected the Native people lands and would have put an end to the quarrel.
And John Chacha tried his best, but at that time and throughout the summer, nobody was controlling the SQ.
They were quite upset that they had tried to go into the community of Kanesatake, and even more upset at the fact that one of their own got killed.
As soon as we went over the mountain, the SQ were there in an unmarked car.
One police officer who had an automatic weapon pointed about a foot from my head.
That was everyday life for most people. Anytime they would try to cross to go buy food or anything, they were treated poorly at all the checkpoints.
And he was shaking. He was shaking like this, and I got angry.
Make them undress in public to check them. Put greasy hands that they've dug in their car and putting it on somebody's clean white shirt.
I basically called him a few choice words, like an asshole, and I said, put that gun down, let's go on shore, we'll see how tough you are,
And they said, Mrs. Etienne, you are under arrest. And I said, well, what am I under arrest for? They said, for intimidation, because you're behind the barricades. I said, I live here.
The SQ didn't want a settlement because they wanted to force their way to tell the natives this is what you have to do.
You could see the hatred and the anger of the police.
So how can you have a peaceful disengagement when the SQ are a law unto themselves?
On the other side, the radicals were expecting to negotiate terms and conditions which would have taken their lands out of the provincial jurisdiction and it would have become an independent nation.
It was a farce. It wasn't a good situation, good circumstances, and we walked away from the table looking at it and saying, you know, these people want a war. That's what they want.
It was awful. It was awful. And I felt sorry for the Sûreté du Québec. So they were in an untenable situation, complete conflict in both ends.
We actually had a TV up on the bridge, and we were watching all the newscasts. We saw everything, and we saw what was going on. Of course, we were upset when they were burning effigies of Mohawks.
Premier Barraza didn't think that the SQ was equipped to deal with the situation. So he called Ottawa, and he called in the Army.
And it sort of came out to us that the government brought the Army in because they couldn't solve it. So if the Army solved it, great. If the Army screwed up, then we had somebody to blame.
Kahnawake were pretty much prepared for any incursion.
We did know that there were some weapons up on the bridge that were dangerous. One was a .50 caliber sniper rifle, and we were concerned about that because we didn't have anything to protect ourselves from that type of fire. Even our APCs, our armored personnel carriers, had breezed through that just like butter.
Our men have worked high steel since there's been high steel. So that gives us knowledge of bridges and structure.
Knowing what it takes to blow a bridge up, we sort of realized that it was more words. If you say you're going to do it, it's just like you're doing it. So it causes the same amount of fear amongst the people.
The outside knows that yes, it was wired to go at one time.
From a military standpoint, we knew exactly what it would take to put a bridge like that down, and there'd be truckloads of explosives.
Kahnawake has per capita for any community anywhere in the U.S. We have more military U.S. servicemen per capita here in this community. So training and knowledge is very diverse.
We had to avoid another death. We could not have lived down the idea that Native people were massacred or killed.
I was on the line. I didn't want to die, but if I had to protect those people.
The fear the soldiers had of having to use deadly force against Canadians, to them, I've spoken to guys who are really roughed up over the fact that, it could have come to that there.
We did what we had to do. The only thing I had to worry about is, am I getting shot today?
That gun down, we'll go for it. I'll take the piss out of you, boy.
John Chiacha died in August 2018, 3 years after appearing in that story. He was 85 years old, and he was referred to as an honorable man by Mohawk leaders both during and after the events of 1990. One of the many events we've all missed out on during this pandemic is the North American Indigenous Games. But some of the athletes still found a way to connect. That story's coming up after the break. Here's a look at the rest of Tuesday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. 22 for Fort McMurray, 20 and showers in Grand Prairie. 30 in Medicine Hat under sunny skies, sunny and 29 in Lethbridge. Sunny for Vancouver with a high of 22, cloudy and 20 for Tofino. 22 in rain for Fort Nelson, 18 and showers in Dease Lake. 9 in Old Crow, showers and 6 for Rock River. 19 with rain for Fort Liard, Trout Lake, and Fort Simpson. 5 with rain in Sax Harbor, 15 with showers for Pawlatuck, 20 in Baker Lake and Whale Cove, 24 for Arviette, 13 with rain in Resolute, 14 in Igloolik. Welcome back. The Polaris Prize is one of the biggest awards in music in Canada. It will be awarded October 19th, and it's been won by such Indigenous artists in the past as Buffy Sainte Marie, Jeremy Dutcher, Tanya Tagaq, and Lido Pimenta in the past. This year's nominees include a Cree name. The band finds itself on this year's shortlist alongside Witch Prophet, shown here, and 8 other artists share this year's shortlist. Nihiawak is from Treaty 6 in Edmonton, and their album is titled Nipi, which means water in Cree. Chris Harper is the lead vocalist.
Without those sounds and without those voices and people being able to interact with them, we're talking about holding back healing. And so this is kind of for everyone. And it's just exciting that there's so many more coming to this table. And we're just happy to be a little small part of it.
Well, we'd like to hear what you think about this or any other story. Here's how you can continue that conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca or find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptnnews. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest Indigenous news. The North American Indigenous Games were virtual this year due to COVID-19. But NAIG at home used virtual platforms to showcase athletes, training, and engaging videos. Michelle Karlenzig has more.
Physically apart, but together at heart.
Physically apart, together at heart.
Physically apart, together at heart. The kickoff slogan for this year's virtual North American Indigenous Games. Although the games were cancelled, that hasn't stopped the athletes and organizers from having their fun. NAIG at Home launched July 11th, and since then, the games released virtual challenges and athletic training videos on social media platforms. In 1990, NAIG has upwards of 10,000 participants, and in host cities like Denver, Colorado, Prince Albert, and Winnipeg. NAIG at Home wrapped up this weekend, and this year's cancelled competition has been rescheduled for 2021 in Halifax. Michelle Karlenzig, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Those are some pretty cool challenges, but sure do miss the games this year. That's your APTN National News for this Monday. For much more, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. We're going to leave you tonight with Sandy Bay jigger Ryan Richard, who put on a jigging show with some of his students online. Here's some clips from that performance. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.
Here for the Master Jigger Show.